Seconds. Hi, everyone. This is Lourdes Turrecha, and I'm the founder of the Rise of Privacy Tech. We're in the Rise of Privacy Tech webcast. We're doing a series on defining the privacy tech landscape because we are releasing a white paper on this about right now. I'm really excited because we will be releasing some of the interviews, the recordings that we've done with the privacy tech leaders who are involved in the research and the writing of this white paper. And today I'm particularly excited because we have Debra Farber, who is the CEO of Principled LLC. Full disclosure, she's also an advisor to the Rise of Privacy Tech. Debra has been one of the early privacy tech advisors, having been one for one of the unicorns, the early unicorns, Big ID. And so, Debra, thank you so much for helping us with the working group, and welcome to the Rise of Privacy Tech's webcast.
Thank you so much for having me in this conversation. Obviously, it's my pleasure to be here. You know, the organization itself is just doing a lot to really help bring investors, advisors, and privacy tech founders together. So there's really no place I'd rather be.
It wouldn't be the same without you. So we're really excited that you could be, a part of this, not just the working group, but the organization in general. So I'm going to jump right into some of the questions that we've actually been working through in our working group. So let's start with an easy one, a softball one. What got you? Yeah, right. So as one of the early folks who turned into privacy tech and saw its potential, what interested you about this emerging landscape?
Yeah, well, so what interested me was privacy problems were finally being tackled by technologists. And in the past, a lot of privacy has been owned within organizations and operated, by mostly like legal teams or from the perspective of like regulation and how are we going to meet requirements and new obligations. And therefore, working in privacy within these organizations really at times felt like a slog where you're just constantly like, the metrics were around, are you compliant or are you doing a certain thing, as opposed to, hey, have you architected your products right? And have you, shifted left to prevent some of the privacy problems instead of just cleaning it up through compliance, right? And so when I started to see that there was this like just not a trickle, but like a deluge of privacy tech being worked on, seeking funding, all around the same time, and to kind of see those VCs and angel investors like turn not from cybersecurity, but like kind of broaden their scope of investments from security tech tools to also inclusive of either privacy lines of business within those security tech tools, but more often like a completely different, like new company being spun up to deal with the technical challenges of privacy. And so for me, it was the innovation, and it's the opportunity to really work on kind of what does the next phase of the internet look like? What does that infrastructure look like if we're going to make it privacy preserving? What should the web kind of look like at the beginning if we had given it some security and privacy safeguards in the first place? Because as you know, the web was originally built with protocols for sharing, to facilitate sharing, which it made the explosive growth, but it didn't factor in at the time the potential security problems and privacy problems, and we had to bolt that on afterwards. And it's not the best way you can architect these things. So basically, why I'm so excited now.
I couldn't agree more with you. For the first time in history, we have technologists and investors actually agree with the regulators, the privacy pros, the experts, the advocates, and the consumers who've been asking for privacy that agree that we need privacy designed and engineered tools. And you were right on point when you said, as opposed to just focusing on compliance, which has been historically the focus here in the privacy space, it's really exciting to see innovation and product that's being designed with privacy in mind. I'm curious. It's been about at least 5 years since you've been working in the privacy tech space, longer than that, 15 years in the privacy space. So now I'm assuming, as far as I know, you're focusing on privacy tech,
Yep.
and so at this stage, you're about just gauging, you're about working with about like a dozen or a couple of dozen privacy tech startups in the space. Is that correct, or something?
Well, I'm officially an advisory board member of 6 privacy tech companies. I'm about to pick up a 7th. And so, yeah, I know, it's exciting. And it's actually a privacy tech company,
Okay.
that has actually added, I'm not going to mention who it is right now, but
Right.
they've added a line of business that I think is really going to be helpful for the advertisers and publishers that have been upended by the great decision to eliminate third-party cookies, but they still have these challenges. So I'm pretty excited about that one. But then I also have made strategic investments in 3 separate companies this year. And that's pretty much my allotment of money that I have to actually invest in. But my goal is now to invest in 3 privacy tech companies a year that I truly believe in, but maybe I'm not an advisor for them, but instead I know that business a little less, but I really believe in the mission and the team, and that's kind of when I decide to invest instead of seeking to advise, because advising is really a great way to align incentives, where it's like I will get equity for being an advisor early in a company, right, and then over time, if I believe in what they're doing and they succeed, then that equity is going to be worth a hell of a lot more than if I got paid cash up front. And then that works for the founders who have little cash up front because they're actually seeking to raise money. And so, it's like a nice trade of I can help them understand the privacy tech industry, how to sell to the players in that industry. And I'm even meeting some VCs and angel investors along the way. But that's also a great reason to join TROPT, right? So, it makes sense that TROPT is kind of the center of my world as well.
Well, yep, that's really great. What are some of the advice, and exciting news? What are some of the advice that you would share with the folks, the privacy pros, the experts who are currently just focusing on compliance policy and want to get more involved in the privacy tech space? If I were to rephrase it, what are some of the things that you, and as a follow-up to that question, what are some of the things that you're looking for in a startup, when you're vetting them? You mentioned some of the factors when you're investing, but when it comes to advising or even coming on board as an employee, as you have in the past, what are some of the things that you look out for in these privacy tech startups before you decide, hey, I want to work with you?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really great question. And it's something that I think I'm constantly evolving over time. Things I've learned is that you really want to make sure that you've got a great working relationship with the founders. So I now ask myself, is this a person I can work with long-term? Is this a person I want to work with long-term? Or, is there hubris there? Are they coachable? Do they want my advice, or do they just want me on their advisory board because of the successes I've had in the past, and it makes them, look better to investors, which is not a bad reason, but you'd want to expect that there's other reasons as well, right? Like, I want to be involved. I want to know, if you're going to have a major pivot, I want to know you're going to tell me that as an advisor and not just be blindsided by it. And these are things that have happened to me. So like I said, this is, there was no playbook for me beforehand. These are things I've learned as I've kind of grown up as a privacy tech advisor. So most important is just a fit with the team. Yeah. And there've been some team members where I'm like, look, I don't think I'm the best fit for you as an advisor, right? Maybe it's, I don't have deep expertise in the ad tech space, right? And so that's why I decided not to, well, not that they asked me, but I didn't try to pursue an advisory role with Blotout. Instead, I decided to invest in Blotout because I knew they're working on a really hard problem and had I looked at their tech and I looked at the way they're solving it. It made sense to me. If you can't understand how something works, then it's just, it could be just gambling when if you're investing with, into tech that you don't quite understand it and just seems like magic. So, for me, I really want to understand how something works and why it's viable What I'm not looking at, and taking like a angel investor hat off, which again, I'm new at. As an advisor, though, not new, I don't look at like, what is the valuation, how much, like all of the finance stuff, all of the like, is this a good investment, is not even something that I care about as an advisor, because different hats, different metrics, but also it's not relevant. Like whether or not this is good tech to me, and like it should belong in, it should grow and help the ecosystem and downstream and end up, preserving privacy, like for end users. Like to me, that's the cause. That's what I'm so excited to bring to market. That's what, for me, a lot of it's the joy of the strategy around it. It's the birthing something new and helping, someone bring their baby into this world, metaphorically speaking, of course. Right. And then, to me, that's the big joy, and to feel heard, which I have not in corporate America for over 16 years. I've gone in and out of big companies and to startups. And I just feel like, in privacy for this long, like abused very often and over, taken for granted that we're doing all this good work to try to protect people's privacy. But at times it's against the aims of business who want to increase revenue for shareholders. And it just feels Sisyphusian.
Obviously, because they don't grasp that there's long-term value in privacy, which is very
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that story is kind of hard to tell. I mean, obviously, like now the market is demanding privacy, right? Individuals are like, have turned against surveillance capitalism and are looking to decentralize the power, democratize that power. And by, decentralizing data, you're also helping preserve its privacy, because there's not a single point of failure, where if you, centralized and you pop a shell, you could be able to gain access to the keys of the kingdom, which we all know about because we've been following data breaches for like 15 years now. And all it does is scare us and not actually seem to prevent them. So the preventing centralized data breaches, a good way to do that is decentralize the data. And we're seeing a lot of that. And that brings with it decentralized power dynamics and democratizing, creators allowed. More and more tech is allowing creators to preserve more of the value of their creation, as opposed to just getting 1% of what they brought into this world. Maybe now they'll get 50%, or, I'm just using random numbers here. But like, those are the business models that I'm seeing of the future, using distributed ledger technology as the foundation for privacy infrastructure, and then being able to build distributed apps on top of that. It is where I'm seeing a huge number of VCs, putting their money when it comes to privacy. It's just like the beginning of the internet again for us.
Web 3.0.
Yeah, where we get to create, we get to participate in the development of new protocols that are going to run the next
I feel like we need an entirely separate episode on DLT, and I do have some questions for you there. But it sounds like, in terms of what you're looking for, obviously the fit is one, the team is one, right?
Yeah, that's right. That was the question.
But no, that's fine. That what I'm hearing is that there's that chemistry that you need. And I'm with you. I mean, I look at the same there when it comes to advisory roles. Obviously, the relationship's important, and it's very much important in the privacy space. It's such a small community, anyways. The second thing I heard is, you really want something that where your expertise is relevant, a product that you understand and that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, it's a two-way street. It's got to be a good fit on both ends. But then what I'm hearing as a third thing is that you're outside, within privacy tech, you're also very much excited about a subset, which is, DLT, solving for privacy infrastructure type of problems. Why DLT? I'm curious. I'd love for you to share with our audience why, or correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I heard from your response anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Why DLT? If what I heard was accurate, why DLT today as opposed to the boring old compliance stuff or the privacy DevOps type of solutions,
Yeah.
or data unions type of startups.
You're right. And I actually think that they're all interesting ecosystems. And it is a good question, because I haven't really even asked myself, like, well, why, the personal data economy and those ecosystems, and, they're not incompatible with DLT though, right? So
No, we're not.
What I like about DLT is you're able to it opens up new use cases beyond privacy, right? Like, so that's why people are going towards it. I mean, there's your decentralized finance aspect, where that's getting a lot of retail investors to go, instead of investing in traditional assets, we're now going to speculate on cryptocurrencies. And there's a lot of laws like outside of privacy, like SEC and global regulators and monetary authorities and such, that are kind of shaping that space. But the tech is really exciting because it allows you to, have a mathematical proofs around how data was transferred and processed. The ledger technology enables all previous transactions to be recorded so that everybody has a single source of truth, which brings transparency. But you're bringing transparency, and you can't delete things off the blockchain, or or it's harder to do off the hash graph. But that just means, like, okay, this is a privacy concern. How do we get around that? It doesn't mean it's a blocker and you should just throw DLT away. And the way that most people are really using DLT in a privacy preserving way, most of all, it allows for data minimization, right? So you don't have to, the goal of DLT is to allow people that are untrusted parties to be able to transact in a trusted way, even though they don't trust each other. And, I could go real deep on this. I'm not going to right now, about
we'll do it in part two,
okay.
We'll do it in part two in a DLT specific episode. But yeah, it's
zero knowledge proofs.
Really, what's that?
I was going to mention also, zero knowledge proofs can then be used to be able to help facilitate. If you want to query, hey, is Debra over 21? Instead of having to show someone my ID that has my address on it, has all this other information that is not necessary to answer whether or not I'm over 21. And you don't need to know that my current age is over 40 to know that I'm over 21. So all you want is that answer. And zero knowledge proofs enable you, through distributed ledger technology, to be able to get those answers and be able to get actual information that, improves your business processes, improves your, improves a lot of things, right? Depending on how you're using the data, without actually, giving the actual information, right? And so that data minimization is going to allow for much more trusted transactions, and it will again allow transactions to be even much quicker, because you're not now validating that. You're validating the authenticity of the transaction, but you're not necessarily in that moment having to validate is Debra Farber, because that's already been done by the system. And what, just to also dovetail into other, you said why DLT and not some of these other areas. Well, another big area that is actually working alongside DLT, but is separate in and of itself, is decentralized identity and decentralized identifiers. And this concept that, again, democratize this, bring the control back to the people, instead of logging in through OAuth and logging in through
a centralized identity system.
Yeah, right. A centralized one that maybe even you log in with your Google ID or your Facebook ID. For this very broadcast, I logged in with my Facebook ID because that was one of the two that it required. But in the future, what I believe we're going to see, what is being worked on by many, many smart people across the world, is wallets and being able to have your keys on your hard devices and your own devices, and you can carry around your keys and then just go into an ecosystem and be like, all right, Debra Farber's here, and be able to, or anonymously, right? I mean, there's that as well. But the goal is we should be managing our own keys. And we need to make that so that it's easy for someone like my mother, who is not technologically inclined, to do. So this needs to be built into the services and the products that we're creating. These will eventually are going to be standards that are, every one of us is going to be able to have more power and control over how our data is used when we show up in a public space.
They're
so excited.
I'm with you. There's certainly a lot of exciting innovations, not just in DLT, but in its adjacency. And you mentioned zero knowledge proofs, which has amazing capabilities in terms of how we compute data in a privacy preserving way. That said, I wouldn't, there are certainly others like SMPC and there are no silver bullets, like you said, right? Like we still, just because we're using a certain type of privacy technology or privacy enhancing technology doesn't mean that we don't have to worry about privacy in its use. So that's kind of like the takeaway.
And I think that's key.
Right.
If you don't mind, I'd love to point out there, at least when it comes to DLT, we hear about privacy coins. We hear about, some of the, and the retail investors who are not privacy experts hear these words privacy coins, when in reality, the privacy that they preserve is confidentiality. It is a security. Yeah. It's anonymity, right? And we've had long discussions about what is anonymity in relation to privacy. And I actually think that anonymity is, it's almost like unplugging your computer. Your identity is not known, therefore you are not showing up as a specific person who anything can be attributed back to you, and therefore there is no privacy problem.
It's not the complete picture of privacy. It's just
not at all. If anything, anonymity was part of privacy, which I do have issues with. I would say it's an edge case, and it's not the thing that you need. You need to understand data flows and data protection rights, and how do you delete data if somebody asked you to, because they have a right to say, I want any of the any of the data that is linkable to my identity or linked to my identity to be removed. And that is something that your company would have to do. So DApp developers need to understand their obligations beyond, is this is the DLT we're building on, does it have privacy features? They need to understand what they need, how do you need to use them in an appropriate compliant way.
We're certainly in agreement that the privacy coins that tout their tool as privacy preserving is very limited in their view, because like you and I both agree on the part that we both agree is that anonymity does not equal privacy.
Correct.
Just because someone might want to exercise anonymity as their choice, doesn't mean that they then get privacy as a default, because there are other aspects that's not accounted for in the anonymity conversation. My goodness, we're not even halfway through some of the questions.
But an hour-long podcast now.
I know, but I do want to pick your brain on, beyond compliance, the big problems that some of the startups have been trying to solve for have been compliance and workflow automation. What are some of the privacy problems that you wish there were tools for, privacy tech tools for? But let's set aside compliance, because that's, been there, done that. A lot of the big startups are playing in that space. I feel like there's so many other problems that we need to go beyond it. What are some of those that come to mind? And you don't have to, you can just pick one if any.
Yeah. Well, I haven't been thinking like, hey, well, okay, there's so many. My brain is just popping up issue spotting as I'm thinking, right? Obviously, we need a lot more tools for engineers. But you and I both know there are, some of our friends in the space are working on that. There's several startups that working on, how do we enable engineers to have like the Devops tools that they need to be able to, have better, whether you're doing static code analysis of privacy, from a privacy perspective, not just security, or you're doing like, creating different libraries that help developers. Like there's so many opportunities. I think it's greenfield there. There's not going to be one company that rules them all, but there's definitely going to be like in the next few years, I urge others to figure out like what are developers struggling with when it comes to privacy and data protection, and let's kind of really work in that space to give them the tools they need to easily or more easily ship code that has where the developers thought about privacy and they've architected for the flow of personal data, right? So it's more and more just down the stack and into engineering. Obviously, there's a huge, challenge right now for a lot of companies in the advertising space. There are a lot of tools there.
Going through an upheaval, and I'm just like
Mhm.
sitting and watching, like, where are we? With cookies getting phased out, and Google's Flock, not receiving the warm reception that they wanted.
Even the ad tech space, I think, was it like a AAA or I think it's one of the advertising organizations is even having a challenge, like giving their guidance to the whole industry that are their membership, right? So I
know who's gonna, right? Are we shifting to first party data, or zero?
Compensating individuals and just saying, sorry, we weren't giving you like a compensation for your data that we're stealing from you, but now we're gonna, give you half. Like, is that like, it remains to be seen what consumers want and will tolerate, and which ad models or new models will work out. So I've got some founders asking me like, hey, we've got like a great data set that's of de-identified data. Can we sell, like, is that like a good business model to sell that? And it's like, I mean, it could be. Who's buying it? I don't know. Like, is it good data? Like, so there's a lot of uncertainty, but it'll also be interesting to see like which new model will win out in the end. Will there be multiple? Like, all consumers are not the same. No. Personally, I'm not going to download an app that I can make 5 cents for each ad, or like 0.01 cent for each ad that I'm clicking for the purpose of just like making money by watching ads. But I do know that there are some more price sensitive people who, like, yeah, sure, if they can save as much money as they can make, like they're going to do that. So, it remains to be seen what's going to be sticky, but like that's a problem that a lot of people are working on. So it is a pretty noisy space. Doesn't mean you can't start a privacy tech company there now. It's just, and there's obviously a lot of money from VCs going to fix that problem, because they're not sure what's going to win out, and everybody, and all of them want a little piece of kind of a potential startup in that space that they can be rooting for within their portfolio. So there's a lot of
certainly two very important problems: the shifting privacy left and tools for developers, and then the marketing side also, equally, if not more pressing of a problem in the privacy space. So I'm with you. I'm excited to see what's going to come out of those two spaces. What are some of the challenges that you're experiencing, in privacy tech when you're working with these startups? What are some of the common ones that keep popping up that you wished, hey, think about this? Like, why aren't you thinking about this? Like, this is super clear to me as someone who's been a privacy expert or an advisor. What are some of the pitfalls that you keep having to repeat yourself, or keep advising these startups?
Well, the number one, which is just like easy to correct, is like, you've got a great product idea, great product or service idea, and you're working on it. And most of the founders I'm seeing are like, either engineers themselves, or coming into a space that they don't really fully know, right? Maybe they moved over from security. Maybe they just like graduated like from their grad school program, and they're trying to figure out like, what they're going to do next. But there's always a problem that they've seen that they want to fix. And they're so concentrating on that problem that they don't even realize they're creating their own privacy problems by putting up their website, and maybe putting up their website and so excited about it, but they put it up and start collecting like email addresses for like a list without having a privacy policy yet, or by using like Google Analytics, when the entire thing when their marketing is like shitting on, but their marketing is like going like, this is what's wrong with big tech and the surveillance capitalism. By the way, we're using Google Analytics. Doesn't tell a great privacy story. In fact, it actually detracts from your privacy story. And so that's the thing I over and over again have to like reiterate, is like, your privacy story does not end at your product, right? You need to build your entire org with privacy by design. And it's not because of compliance, but it's really because like you're not eating your own dog food otherwise, right? If you believe in privacy and data protection, which people have completely different belief systems coming to this. Like, some are coming from like full on libertarian ideology of like, no one should be able, of like lock it all down, like government should never know anything, like I'm not even talking ideology, like people come with their own ideology. But for me, privacy and data protection, I come from it from like a civil rights perspective of like, we should have a fundamental right to privacy. We need to embed these further into our, constitution, into our documentations of our regulations, our way of being as a nation, right? Because, what I'm seeing is that the reason that so many people in like retail investors, meaning like non-sophisticated, accredited investors, so your everyday person, they feel violated. They feel like they've been being watched, not by government as much as like by big companies, and they feel like they are powerless, and they feel like they're losing liberty, and so there is a freedom component, a liberty component to and component. I mean, the privacy for that, yeah.
I mean, very important. Like, obviously, we come from the civil right. Privacy is a human right, background. But even if we don't go there, it's also a brand issue for these startups, right? Like, at the Rise of Privacy Tech, we like to tell them you need to walk your privacy talk. You can't be selling a product and not, like you mentioned, have a website that has shitty privacy practices, non-existent privacy statement. So I couldn't agree more with you on that. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I wish we could keep talking about this, but we are at time. I do want to thank you for joining us today and give you the opportunity to maybe invite if you feel like it, invite the audience or share a call to action that you may have with the Rise of Privacy Tech community, if you have one.
Yeah, and I've been asked this question a few times in different ways. And the one I'll just, rather than come up with a new one, I'm going to recycle an old one. But I think it's a goodie. And I think that even privacy professionals in the space for a long time can sometimes be sucked into the fact that there's, regulatory compliance requirements and all that. Mm-hmm. And so we're used to thinking about risk and personal data risk in terms of, what's the risk to the data? Can it be lost? Can it be compromised? What are the, and how do we deal with internal risk from an enterprise risk perspective? And this applies the same to privacy tech as well, that is not the point of privacy and data protection regulation. That is literally looking at it only from what is your business interest in this data and obligations around it. As we build products and services for people, for humans, we need to remember that the right of privacy and the data protection requirements all attach to a person, in that we need to be protecting the person from privacy harms. And those harms beyond breach. Those could be, just making information known, sharing it with the wrong person because you had sloppy practices. It could be you have so much data about a human that they feel like they're being surveilled by that company, and they don't feel like they have the liberty to act as who they are and show up as who they are, as their authentic selves, and so make different choices based on the feeling that they're always being watched. Like, those are privacy problems, and you need to think that all of those through as you're building your products and services. That is what we're trying to protect. People, not the data. The data's secondary. We want to protect their data because we respect the person, and all your business activities should be reflective of that aim.
At the end of the day, privacy is about people. I mean, amen.
Yeah.
Debra, thank you so much for joining us and for working with us on the white paper and the privacy tech landscape working group these past few months. We're so grateful for your expertise and your time and your generosity in working with the startups in the ecosystem and helping them and helping fuel privacy innovation, which is our mission here at the Rise of Privacy Tech. To everyone who's watching, we will be releasing the white paper, and it should be released right now. And if we will be sharing a link to it at the bottom of this webcast recording. So check it out. If you have feedback, let us know. We will be updating it every year. And so thank you for tuning in today. And Debra, thanks again. I can't wait for part 2 of this webcast episode with you.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. I have so much fun doing these. So it doesn't even feel like work being an advisor at times, right? I mean, this is just like in my flow. So
it's just like
much joy, honestly. Lord, it's a pleasure.
Thanks, Debra. Bye, everyone.
Bye.